Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to find your home engulfed in flames, your children trapped inside. You try everything to save them, but when the fire finally dies out, there's no trace of their bodies, no bones, no ashes, just nothing. Years later, a chilling message arrives hinting that one of those dead children might still be alive, and that the truth about what happened that night was covered up. This is the chilling mystery of the Sodder children. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family, George, Jenny, and their 10 children had spent the night celebrating. One by one, the children went to bed, unaware that this night would change everything. Sometime after midnight, a fire broke out in the house. Flames spread quickly, filling the rooms with thick smoke. George and Jenny woke up in a panic. Grabbing their youngest children, they ran outside, their hearts racing. 4 of their children made it out with them, but 5, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were trapped inside. George tried to run back in, but the heat and smoke pushed him back. Jenny screamed for help as they tried to call the fire department, but the phone wasn't working. Desperate, they ran to a neighbor's house to call for help. The operator wasn't picking up. Another neighbor, farther away, finally reached the fire department, but even then, no one came. Frantic, George had another idea. He ran to his 2 coal trucks, hoping to drive them up to the house and use them to climb into the upstairs windows. But in a bizarre twist, both trucks that had worked perfectly the day before, refused to start. It was as if something, or someone, had made sure there was no way to save his children. Hour after hour passed, the fire raging on. The Sodders could do nothing but watch as their home burned to the ground. By the time firefighters finally arrived, 7 hours later, it was too late. The house was gone, and so were their children. Despite the devastating fire, something didn't make sense. When the flames finally died out, the Sodders expected to find some trace of their 5 children. Bones, ashes, something, but there was nothing. No remains. No evidence that they had ever been in the house when it burned. The fire chief offered a chilling explanation. The flames had burned so hot that they completely incinerated the children's bodies, leaving nothing behind. At first, this seemed like a logical answer. But as time passed, experts began questioning it. House fires, even the most intense ones, don't reach temperatures high enough to turn bones to ash. In fact, cremation ovens, designed specifically to reduce bodies to ash, still leave behind bone fragments. And then there was something even stranger. As the Sodders sifted through the ruins of their home, they found household appliances, stove parts, a sewing machine, still recognizable. If the fire was hot enough to destroy human bones, why were metal objects still intact? The more the Sodders thought about it, the more they became convinced something wasn't right. This wasn't just a tragic accident. Something else had happened to their children. In the days before the fire, strange things started happening. Things that, at the time, didn't seem connected but would later become deeply unsettling. A man was seen parked along the road, watching the Sodder children as they played outside. He didn't speak to them. He didn't move. He just sat there, staring. Jenny Sodder noticed him, but life went on. After all, this was a small town. Who would want to harm them? Then, on the night of the fire, something even stranger happened. Jenny woke up suddenly, startled by a loud thud on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. But before she could make sense of it, the smell of smoke filled the house. And even more disturbing, there was a witness. Someone claimed they saw a man near the Sodder home that same night tampering with their trucks. Those very trucks, which George had planned to use to rescue his children, mysteriously refused to start. It was almost as if someone had made sure they wouldn't. But the most chilling detail of all? While the Sodder house was still burning, a woman came forward with a shocking claim. She had seen the missing children inside a passing car, staring out the window as they were driven away into the night. If that was true, then the fire wasn't just a tragedy, it was a cover-up. And the Sodder children may not have died in the flames at all, but who would do such a thing? And why? George Sodder may have had more enemies than he realized. As an Italian immigrant, he had built a good life for his family in West Virginia, but he was outspoken, especially when it came to politics. He was a fierce critic of Benito Mussolini, the dictator of Italy, and in his tight-knit immigrant community, not everyone agreed with him. In fact, some despised him for it. One man in particular made a chilling threat. A life insurance salesman, angry at George's strong opinions, warned him that if he didn't keep quiet, his house would go up in flames, and his children would be destroyed. At the time, it might have sounded like an empty threat, but after what happened that night, it didn't seem so impossible. If the fire was no accident, then the real question was, what were they trying to hide? And more importantly, where were the missing children? George and Jenny refused to believe that their children had died in the fire. The lack of remains, the eerie threats, the suspicious sightings, it all pointed to something more. Desperate for answers, they launched their own investigation, and what they uncovered was chilling. Reports began surfacing of the children being seen alive. A woman claimed to have spotted them at a tourist stop the very next day. Weeks later, another witness reported seeing them at a hotel, accompanied by unfamiliar adults. But despite these leads, the authorities refused to help. When the Sodders pleaded for the FBI to step in, their request was denied. It was as if someone wanted the truth to stay buried. Then, the most shocking discovery yet. One of the men of the coroner's jury who had ruled the fire an accident was the same insurance salesman who had threatened George. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get stranger, the fire chief made a bizarre claim. He said he had found a child's heart in the ashes. But when it was examined, it wasn't human at all. It was a piece of beef liver untouched by the fire. Why would someone go to such lengths to deceive the Sodder family? In 1949, still determined to find answers, George Sodder had the site of the fire re-excavated. This time, he brought in an expert to carefully examine the debris. And that's when they found something unexpected. Human vertebrae buried in the dirt. At first it seemed like the proof George and Jenny had been searching for. But then, the expert made a shocking discovery. The bones didn't belong to any of the missing Sodder children. In fact, they didn't belong to a child at all. The vertebrae were from someone much older, ruling out the possibility that they had come from Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, or Betty. Even more unsettling, there was no evidence that these bones had been exposed to fire at all. For 40 years, the Sodder family refused to give up hope. They plastered missing posters everywhere, questioned anyone who might know something, and even put up a massive billboard along a busy highway begging for answers. A reward was offered, but no solid leads ever surfaced. Then, in 1968, something eerie happened. Jenny Sodder received a letter in the mail, postmarked from Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his 20s. He had dark hair, deep-set eyes, and features that looked eerily similar to her missing son Louis. On the back of the photo was a chilling message: "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys." The meaning of the note was unclear, but to Jenny the resemblance was undeniable. Could her son still be alive after all these years? If so, who had sent the letter? And why? Desperate for answers, the Sodders hired a private investigator to track down the sender. He set off on his search. But then, something even stranger happened. He vanished. The detective was never heard from again. No reports, no updates. It was as if he had simply disappeared. Had he uncovered something he wasn't supposed to? Had someone silenced him before he could reveal the truth? George and Jenny Sodder spent the rest of their lives chasing the truth. They refused to believe their children had simply vanished in the flames. They wrote letters, followed leads, and kept searching year after year, hoping for a breakthrough. But they never found the answers they so desperately sought. When George passed away in 1969 and Jenny in 1989, they still held on to the belief that their children might be out there somewhere. And their youngest daughter Sylvia, who had been just 2 years old that fateful night, picked up where they left off. Even now she continues to search, refusing to let the mystery of her siblings fade into history. To this day, no one knows what really happened to the Sodder children. Were they taken? Was there a conspiracy to cover it up? And if they did survive, where did they go? The case remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in American history, but maybe, just maybe, the truth is still out there waiting to be uncovered. What do you think really happened that night? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Don't like this video, and definitely don't subscribe. You wouldn't want weekly doses of mind-blowing mysteries, creepy legends, and unexplained events, would you? Yeah, I didn't think so, and whatever you do, don't click on the video above, unless you want to uncover the secrets they don't want you to know.